Welcome to our presentation on maybe thinking differently about sort of the supply and demand challenges related to hiring and filling nurse aid shifts. I have my trusty partner, Lindsay, with me.
Hello.
There are times when I have deep pauses in between thoughts, and she knows how to help me finish those thoughts. So you'll be hearing from both of us today. Real quick before we get started, just to give you a little bit of a sense of my background, I've been in different versions of education technology or e-learning and senior care, and that's been my focus for the last 15 years. I joined Straightaway just over a year ago, really because of an understanding of the substantial challenges that have to do with the CNA supply or nurse aid supply. You'll notice that we talk about that on this front slide as our shortage problem because we're in this to support you. We don't think this is our way to help you fix your problem. We think about it as we're in this together, and if that's just kind of the way our company is sort of culturally set up. My role is overseeing our product strategy and product development, as well as how we help manage customers once they've become customers, so in a post-sales environment. So without any ado, I guess one quick question is, please don't be shy and ask a question should you have one, because while I do appreciate hearing myself talk, it's actually probably a little bit more interesting if others chime in. So don't be shy. Here's the challenge that we've seen. Really, there's a supply and demand problem. And the way we understand that and everything that we've seen is that, when the labor market wasn't quite so tight and you could find an ample amount of nurse aides or CNAs, depending upon which state you're in, you could get those on the open market, and you could probably offer them a wage that was somewhere in the $12 to $13 an hour range, and that's what you would be paying the majority of the time, aside from having to call in people for overtime or some agency, but that wasn't a majority of it. So your total average labor cost was pretty close to the hourly wage. What's happened as the labor market's gotten a lot tighter is that there's more opportunities for people to take different jobs, and that the total volume of CNAs or nurse aides that are working in skilled environments or environments that are looking for people with that certification is there's not enough supply available. And as a result, operators are filling those slots either through overtime or agency at a much greater rate. And now the total labor cost is much greater than that hourly wage. And we've spoken with some folks who've told us that, even though they pay a high rate and they pay $14 an hour, they still have 70% turnover. And in order for them to fill all their slots, they calculate their blended hourly rate at closer to $20 or $21 an hour. So there's really a lot of opportunity to you know, build your own capacity and get that labor rate closer to the expected hourly wage. Now, why do we see that it's happening? Well, we see, kind of a situation that occurs like this. Every day, the people who are running the building, and thank goodness for those folks who are making sure that the people who are our residents or patients are being taken care of. But every morning they wake up and they know their census. They know their PPD and they know their ratios. What they might not know is who of the expected staff that are going to show will call off or no show, or they might not even have all those shifts filled. They know they have to fill those shifts, so they got a couple of different options. I think the first thing that the DONs or the administrators do is they find out who among the nursing staff wants to be a CNA for the day. Then they pick up the phone and call folks and try to get somebody to come in. Then they offer overtime, and lo and behold, even though our latest survey says nobody does or uses agencies, I also know that from talking to somebody who was going through budgeting season last year, just changed their agency budget number from 3% to 5%, and killing 2% of their bottom line. So we know that agency is in the mix. And honestly, it's acceptable because what are you going to do? You're not going to take care of your residents. You can't do that, and you can't hold the people in the building to that standard. And we're grateful that they are taking care of the residents, but they do what's urgent and not necessarily have the opportunity to think about what's important. So what that really says is that nobody really believes there's a credible alternative to this status quo. But if we could be servant leaders and think about supporting the buildings and think about having a strategic approach it's going to require you to think a little bit differently than has historically been done. Could we hold the facilities to a different standard? Could we help them build their own staff capacity so that they can avoid doing the things that they don't really want to do? Nobody wants to pick up the phone and call the agency. If we can avoid it, all the better. So that's what we're about, and that's the problem we're solving. And so want to talk a little bit about how we think about it differently. So this isn't the most attractive slide or flow chart that you have ever seen, but I think it illustrates sort of the whole point about thinking about something differently. So what this is intended to do is show how sort of supply chain operates. And for our purposes, we're going to talk about 4 elements of it. We're going to talk about the customer. We're going to talk about the product. We're going to talk about manufacturing, and then we're going to talk about purchasing. And those are the 4 points we want to land on, because that's how we sort of see this issue is relevant to you all. The first is the customer, and in our analogy, let's think about the customer as the facility. And what does the facility want? The facility wants a stable number of employees, nurse aides, who will be at work so they can avoid paying higher labor rates. The product in this instance, well, the product is a nurse aide. Again, whether it's a CNA or whether, HIO and it's a nurse aide, That's what the product is. Manufacturing, this is really a training program. How many and how quickly can you train? How reliably can you train? And at what quality can you train? Because you really want to, to the extent you have great needs, you want to be able to put students through quickly and get them on the floor as quickly as they can so that you can solve the shortage issues. And then the last piece is purchasing. And when we think about purchasing, this is about sort of what are the raw materials and supplies that I need to order that go into the factory so that I can create the product. So for us, we really see purchasing as what are the numbers of students that need to be enrolled in our training class. So for us, a good way of sort of visualizing and seeing what it is that we provide you is a full solution that is based upon, providing raw materials or people who are students who, on this conveyor belt that I think Henry Ford would appreciate and love, go into the school factory, and then, quickly thereafter, our nurse aides, whether they're state tested or certified, as output that can begin working on your floor. And all along the way, you're, building a relationship with them, getting them excited about working with you, and having the opportunity to sort of control your destiny so you're not at the whims of a labor market that is tightening as we speak, and as the silver tsunami nears, is going to become more and more existential to you all. Here's how we think about it, and we think about it in 4 elements. The first element is really a demand dashboard, and this is really the way you can begin to optimize what you think you're going to need, not just today, but in the future. So we know for a fact that there are seasonality impacts to turnover, whether it's occurring right now, maybe it's going to be a little bit later than February because of the shutdown and the fact that people are processing their tax returns differently. And so it's going to be a little bit later. But typically there's a surge in February and June and sometimes around the holidays. So because we're a sister company of Relias, we have reams and reams and reams of aggregated turnover data that allows us to be able to predict with pretty good certainty about what demand looks like within regions and zip codes. So we can understand by looking at who you are and looking at your data and looking at data from CMS, what we anticipate and could believe your staffing needs are going to be. We also know how long it takes to go from the beginning of a class to being able to be state tested or pass the test, or in some states, whether it's Indiana or others, where you can work prior to taking the test and you have a duration to take the test, how quickly it is before they can complete nurse aid responsibility on the floor. And so therefore we can really sort of help identify what the schedule ought to be to minimize the number of shifts that you're going to miss. So again, a demand dashboard to optimize supply. You need to know and be able to predict when you're going to need folks so you can get them just in time. The second element is state-aligned digital content. And we use that really to produce the supply, right? We're using this training program to make and create the nurse aides. or educate them in a manner in which they can pass the test. And there's two pieces to this, right? It says digital. Well, digital doesn't mean it's an e-learning course, because many states don't allow for that. What digital means is stored in the cloud, available to be delivered by instructors, or in states that allow for online, to be delivered online. There's 4 different kinds of content. There's instructional materials, there's skills videos, there are context videos. What does it feel like to be in a building? Let's give some real examples and scenarios of what life like a CNA is going to be about. And then all along the way, there are assessments, and we use those assessments to help improve knowledge, as well as to help improve the student's readiness to pass the test. The third piece is really instructor software and the tools necessary for those who are sort of managing the class. In states where it can be taught online, you still need to continuously engage with the students to make sure you're following their progression. But in the majority of our customers, the classroom training is being led by an instructor delivering content, but we want to make it as simple as possible so that somebody who is just 2 and 1, meaning RN for 2 years, 1 year in long-term care, which is typically the requirement for being an instructor. Some states, LPNs can do it. Have the right tools, have the right preloaded curriculum, and sequenced in accordance with your state's requirements. For some reason in North Carolina, they want you to have information differently than they do in Ohio, differently than they do, as you might imagine, in the great state of California, which wants to have its rules embedded in something that is probably more valuable than concrete. But the point is, we want to have the ability to deliver it in whatever fashion, in whatever sequence is required by your state. And then lastly, we also provide, in this instance, hopefully you don't take this too cynically, but the raw materials, if you will. And these are students. So we help recruit students. And this is a real example of a portion of a recruiting ad that was placed on one of the platforms. We use several platforms to gain recruits. We put those people in front of you all, and you all select the student that you want to enroll. So this is Crystal. She seems like a great candidate. She's got her GED. She's been, held a number of jobs, but she's also been a direct care aide in a home health facility, as well as a personal care aide. And so she's looking to make a career progression, and she's a great candidate and would, want to, and shown expressed interest in becoming a CNA and going through this course. So again, 4 elements. Know what your demand is. Be able to digitally provide classroom content. Do it in a manner that is simple and easy for the instructors, either to deliver in an instructor-led environment or to support students going through an online environment. And last, bring students to the table so you've got an adequate supply. So really, we're talking about, if this is something that interested you and you want to learn more, my email is at the bottom. Our company website is at the bottom. If you want to dial in the old-fashioned way, rather than calling the agency, maybe you tell people in the buildings to call 919-245-7111 and hit extension 1. But the next steps, should we get lucky enough to work together in this partnership to solve this big problem, is we would come and we talk about how you use the dashboard and the data that we have already. So you don't have to go and provide us with data, but how we can predict and optimize what we think the demand is, how we can help build that capacity and do it on a regular basis in accordance with spikes and valleys of when you need people. And then really, how do we engage that nurse aide team, not just in the recruiting process or not just in the training process, but also in their first 90 days of employment, so that they really feel like they're part of a team. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. And, curious for any comments or thoughts. And my feelings won't be hurt if there are none, because I think that's sort of the par for the course. But
we do have a couple of questions.
Fantastic.
So the first question is one that we usually get, which is, will the slides be available after this presentation? I am happy to share slides with people. What I can do is, when I send a follow-up email after this webinar, I will include the presentation in that email. And we also always post our recorded webinars on our YouTube page, so you're always welcome to check them out there as well. And then we actually have a couple of content-related questions.
Okay, great.
So the first one is, can you provide support for finding and preparing instructors for training programs?
We have done that, yes. So what I can tell you is this. We have, just like we've run recruiting ads and placed recruiting for students, we've done the same for instructors. And we have had some pretty good success with that. What I can tell you is we probably learned a little bit about how to do that, because sometimes people don't read the ad and the requirement quite as closely as they read the compensation. So yeah, we've learned a lot, and yes, we can do it. Love to have the opportunity to speak with you more closely about it.
Great. And then the next question that we have is, how is the digital content specific to different state skills and standards?
So we have a baseline, and the baseline are the federal requirements. And the federal requirements are the 75 hours of classroom, 16 and in the order of the Fed. And then there's the clinical piece. What we know is each state has a different version of the sequencing of that. And so we make the content modular so that you can put it in the right order. So Indiana's order is different than North Carolina's order. In Indiana, it requires more hours. In North Carolina, even though they say it's 75 hours, when you go through the hidden process of regulatory approval, it appears to be more like 100 hours. And so the ordering is something we do on our side. So each state is ordered specifically in the right content order. And we have skills videos for each state. Many of the states are supported by Prometric and Pearson VUE. Indiana is not. So we have a different supplier of the Indiana RCPs. And I think in Indiana, there's 73 RCPs. So it's state dependent. We have a team that focuses on the regulations in your state, and we can talk about specifics should we have the opportunity for a follow-up.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. How are you tackling assisted living that do not have a skilled setting to provide the clinical training?
That is a great question, and I know we've run into it previously, and I can't recall the exact answer that we gave, just because it was, I want to say it was sometime not quite exactly a year ago, so I can't give specifics. Do we know who it is so that we can follow up and do that research and
Yeah,
do that specific?
yeah. I tell you what, Kristen, we will follow up with you individually on that question. Thank you for asking it. And then the last question that I have here so far is what kind of data will an organization be able to capture with these tools?
So we capture data primarily from CMS as it relates to how we anticipate demand. You'll have access to all of our systems. So when we're thinking about demand and what you need and thinking about how we're anticipating that, you'll have access to all of that. You'll have access to a funnel of recruits that become students. I mean, everything that we have that we store on your behalf is available to you. So you'll have access to everything. Maybe it would be an opportunity to show you if you want to follow up on and actually see that data, because it's easier to show rather than yeah.
So our regulatory success specialist, Jill, is on the line, and she chimed in with the assisted living.
Oh, great.
She said that a few states do allow assisted living to conduct their own clinicals. Otherwise, we take the ownership to support any assisted living facility and locating a skilled nursing facility partner site to conduct your clinical. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Kristen. If not, you can always shoot me another message. But that looks like all the questions that we had for the time being. So if we're ready to wrap it up, we can go ahead and do that. You good to go?
I'm good to go.
Okay.
Thank you so much for giving me 30 minutes of your time. I know it's precious. Love to have the opportunity to follow up either in person or remotely again. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.